It's time to start your morning by taking 5. Here's your host, Matt McMaster.
You're listening to Take 5, a quick 5-minute take on the biggest things happening in Nebraska sports. I am your host, Matt McMaster, and today we are talking about what is the most important game on Nebraska football schedule. There are plenty of these games, I think, littered across the schedule. And it's funny because I've talked about it before on this pod that this is a season of checking off boxes, right? There's a lot of boxes to check off, a lot of things to accomplish that Nebraska football has not accomplished over the last couple of years. And not just a couple of years, over the last nearly a decade now, in terms of beating a ranked team, beating Minnesota on the road, beating Iowa. They haven't done that under Matt Rule. Winning a game, beating a Power 5 team in the first game of the season. There's a lot of things that Nebraska this year, rightfully so, has positioned themselves in order to accomplish. And it's just whether or not and how many of those things that they are able to accomplish. And when I was going through the schedule, the Minnesota game on the road is going to be really big. That'll be a potential swing game where it's going to be super competitive. The game against Michigan at home in week 4, where it could potentially be a massive litmus test of where is this program going and where are they now. That is huge. You have the Penn State game on the road where, man, if they are able to win that game against one of the best teams in the country in a hostile environment, that would be absolutely bonkers. But there are two games that I've really boiled down to what I think are the most important this season for Nebraska football. And funny enough, it's the first game of the season and the last game of the season. Cincinnati in a neutral site, quote unquote, even though it's going to be about 95% Nebraska fans in Kansas City against the Bearcats, and in Lincoln against the Iowa Hawkeyes. And I'll start with the one that is probably the second most important in my opinion, and that's Iowa. Next year, so 2025, in my opinion, is the season that really sets up 2026. Nebraska needs to have success in 2025 and show that they are progressing so they hammer it home in 2026. And that way they can convince the guys that they've hopefully won games with that, hey, come back and next season we can be legitimate college football playoff contenders. That is what this season is about. I don't think this team has the firepower this season to be a college football playoff team. I just don't. But I think that they can develop and they can take steps toward having that firepower for next season when you go down the list of really young, talented players. And beating Iowa at home would signify massive progress for this team. And also, to add on top of that, I think losing to Iowa, a team that you're probably going to be pretty evenly matched against at home, and having that sour taste in your mouth, especially after you had such a sour taste in your mouth at the end of the last Iowa game in Iowa City, for that to happen again, I feel like, now, obviously, if Nebraska is 9-2 at that point and they lose that game, you'll still be happy about being 9-3, and maybe if you're 8-3, like there's scenarios that you can play into it, which is, that can kind of lessen the blow if you end up losing that game. But to win that game, to have that momentum heading into the offseason, an offseason that hopefully for Nebraska will be full of hope and legitimate merited momentum toward making the college football playoff. If you were to win that game, it would do wonders for that program. But because there are things that may have been baked into what happens if you lost, and there are ways to get over that loss, that's why it's the second most important game. I think Cincinnati is the most important game to begin the year because there's just been, I wouldn't say so much hype, but there's a lot of hope. This is less about hype and more about hope. Nebraska fans have seen what bad football looks like, what bad culture looks like, what not heading in the right direction looks like, enough to know what it should look like. And especially those fans who have been around since the 90s and early 2000s can see legitimate winners. What Matt Rule is doing, that's what it looks like. He looks like he's building a winning program, and there's a lot of hope and a lot of optimism and a lot of talent on this team, and you're going to be rolling into one of the loudest stadiums in the world where 95% of it is going to be filled up by your fans playing a team that, is a fine Big 12 team, but isn't one of the premier Big 12 teams where you're going to be favored by about 6.5 to maybe 7 points come kickoff time. Like, if you lose this game, man, it doesn't derail the season, but it's pretty damn close to it. And it's a massive, massive dent in the hope and hype and optimism that you might have heading into the season. And I think it affects games in the future. I think you're way more likely to beat Michigan if you beat Cincinnati than you are if you lose that game. Because if you were to beat Cincinnati, then you go ahead and you whip up on Akron and you whip up on Houston Christian, those two games, like the momentum you can build in those two, lower non-con games, that actually matters heading into Michigan. If you lose to Cincinnati and then you whip up on those teams, it's not going to matter. You're not going to think, oh, they look good, or oh my God, they're humming, or oh my God, they're scoring a lot of points, because it's a moot point because they lost to Cincy. So to win the Cincinnati game, to give yourself the right to make those Houston Christian game and the Akron game matter and build up that momentum heading into Michigan is insane. I mean, if you can head into Michigan with that amount of positivity after beating Cincinnati, I think it makes you even more likely to beat a Michigan team that is going to be shorthanded without their head coach. And that leads, that could potentially lead to a big win against the Wolverines, which then leads to a big game against the Michigan State Spartans. And so it's like, I feel like a win against Cincinnati, it starts this snowball effect. And this it's also known as momentum, that, hey, Nebraska isn't just on paper should be good again. This is actually a team that can do some big things in college football this season. And I think what the theme of this season is winning games that you have lost in the past. That's the main theme. Can you beat teams? Can you win games that maybe the last couple of years you would have lost to? This game against Cincinnati, week 1 in Arrowhead, is a game that they have consistently lost over the last decade and a half. Can you do it? Can you show that things are changing? That is the key to the Cincy game, and I think that is the key to this season. All right, I've been Matt McMaster, and that's been Take 5.